Hi everyone, this is the introductory lecture for week 2. I'm going to try to keep it within 5 to 10 minutes for you this week. I want to begin by reminding you that week 2 is when our discussion points start in earnest, so to remind you, you need to both read and post, and you need to visit at least 3 separate times during the week in order to earn the full 10 points for the week. But your grade on discussion is cumulative, so it is possible to do less than 10 points and still end up with 100 at the end of the semester. I've posted a list of FAQs about discussion on the D2L, and they should answer all of your questions, but if they don't, just send me an email or give me something on Sally, and I will try to respond. All right, so I want to briefly recap from last week. Our definition of popular culture puts the emphasis on the popular or the people involved in culture. So we are talking about popular culture that is created by people who make do with the symbolic resources that the institutions in their society provide. And so for this week, we're going to look at some of those institutions and how they provide those resources and then what people do with them, right? That's going to be our focus throughout, even though we're talking about different periods of time. We're interested, by and large, in the work that people do to transform these resources into meaningful expressions of interest. So in other words, how do people take what's available to them and inject meaning into it, right? Meaning isn't inherent to these cultural resources, or at least the meaning that is inherent isn't the only possible meaning, right? So we're interested in the ways that people take what's given to them and maybe do something surprising with it. For this week, we're going to look at some of the struggles that have occurred over cultural resources across time. We're going to look at the differences between pre-modern, modern, and postmodern societies and at the cultural forms that were common in each. So in addition to learning a little something about what popular cultures were like in these other times and places, you ought to also be paying attention to what are the different material and social structures of organization within each society, right? So what are the governing economic and political systems like? Who has power in the society and who doesn't? And then how does that influence what gets called culture in that society? And what kinds of practices do not seem to count as culture, or what kind of practices might be denigrated or marginalized within the culture because they don't meet with the expectations of those in authority, right? Well, all of these societies are different, and you want to pay attention to those differences. There's one similarity, which is that there are always power struggles, and we're interested in those power struggles, and power struggles around culture in particular. So where do we see people in authority trying to impose a culture on others, and then what do those people do in response to those attempts? We're going to use 3 key terms to answer the questions, and these terms are taste, status, and cultural authorization. And we talked about taste a little bit in the last chapter, if you read it carefully. Anyway, taste is not really about people's individual preferences, but rather about the process of socialization whereby you learn to classify and judge things according to the codes of the group that you identify with. And so taste it's not just a possession, right? It's a thing, a set of knowledge, a set of preferences that other people share and that distinguish you as a group from other groups, right? So I got this little picture of social cliques in high school to kind of illustrate the way taste preferences distinguish between people. And we're interested in those processes of how these distinctions emerge and then how they also order people's relationships to each other in society, right? So we're interested in questions of status. Status refers to your social position relative to others in a group, and it's not just about socioeconomic status or wealth, right? Who has more money? It's also about what sociologist Pierre Bourdieu calls cultural capital, right? Or the possession of a certain type or breadth of knowledge, these sort of non-economic factors that can enhance your social mobility, right? So, for example, English professors don't make a whole heck of a lot of money. News for you. But what we do have is a PhD and a set of skills that intimidate others. We're good at writing, we're good at reading, and we can often wield our knowledge like a club to make other people feel small, right? So that knowledge doesn't actually bring us more wealth, but it might bring us more social mobility. We might have a higher social status because of the way that we impose our knowledge on others, right? And try to make others feel small in order to make ourselves feel big, right? You've probably had English teachers who've been like that a little bit. I hope I'm not one of those. All right, so we're going to be interested in how issues of taste define and divide us, and how they help arrange us on a hierarchy within society. They determine our status relative to others in the group. Yeah. The final term we're going to use is cultural authorization. And cultural authorization basically refers to the way that a certain legitimacy gets attached to some forms of cultural practice and detached from others in a society. And so to focus on authorization means to ask how one set of tastes, one type of cultural capital, becomes dominant in the society. Who helps promote it, and how, and what happens to competing forms of culture, right? How are they weakened or marginalized in comparison to the dominant culture? Through what processes do these things happen, right? So who gets to determine what's right in culture and who gets to determine what's wrong is effectively what we're talking about here. These struggles over status and authority are at the center of popular culture study, and we want to know how official or dominant cultures get created and how people then respond to these dominant cultures, right? Do they just accept the materials that they're given, or do they try to turn the official cultural forms to other uses? Do they try to make them to make their own sense out of these materials and to make those materials speak for them rather than to or at them? Right? Okay. So to illustrate these concepts of taste, cultural capital, and status, I've added another video in the next brick. You should take a look at that. It's by a sociologist, and it's basically using a Woody Allen movie to illustrate how cultural capital can be utilized as a weapon to belittle some people and elevate others. Right? How they both define one's identity and divide groups within society. Right? And then I have a little brick that is for your amusement. Though these periods of history are distinct, right? The pre-modern, the modern, and the postmodern societies are all organized in different ways. They're not so distinct as to be completely unrecognizable. And so one of the examples that I can give to illustrate this is Suzanne Collins' Hunger Games book series and now movie series. She draws on a lot of references from ancient Roman culture. And those are not so strange to us that we can't understand what she's doing. And in fact, if you know something about ancient Rome, it enriches your understanding of those texts. So there's a little blog piece from Encyclopedia Britannica which explains some of these references. See if you can find a few more. For example, I don't think they mentioned that most of the names of the characters in the capital are Roman names. The games makers have a kind of political status within Panem that is equivalent to games makers in Rome. Right? So there are various parallels between this very postmodern set of novels and this pre-modern life. And the question for you is, what is the basis of the similarity, according to Suzanne Collins? Why does she draw on Rome? Why does she feel like that might be a good reference point? All right, so I hope you enjoy those pieces. And the reading for this week, you have discussion already available. You need to log on at least 3 times, and you need to both post and read in order to get full credit. Posts don't have to be huge, by the way, but they should be substantive. They should make a substantive contribution to class discussion. All right. So I hope you have a good week, and I will speak at you later. I will send out a note about this week's office hours, probably tomorrow.